Present.
Felice. Gennaro.
Here.
Gutierrez.
Presente.
Hanif.
Here.
Hanks.
Present.
Holden.
Here.
Hudson.
Present.
Joseph.
Present.
Kagan.
Present.
Krishnan.
Here.
Lee. Lewis.
Present.
Marte.
Present.
Mealy. Menon.
Present.
Moya.
Present.
Narcisse.
Present.
Nurse.
Here.
Osei.
Present.
Palladino.
Present.
Wrestler.
Present.
Richardson Jordan. Riley. Rivera. Salamanca. Sanchez.
Present.
Lee.
Here.
Shulman.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Ung. Velasquez.
Here.
Vernikoff.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Juan. Yeager.
Here.
Borelli.
Present.
Powers.
Aye.
Speaker Adams.
I am present.
Thank you. We have no invocation today, so we'll now have the adoption of the minutes by Councilmember Joanne Ariola.
I make a motion that the minutes of the stated meeting of May 11th, 2023 be adopted as printed.
Thank you. Messages and papers from the mayor.
Preconsidered M158 through preconsidered M160, mayoral home rules.
State and federal legislation.
Communication from city, county, and borough offices.
M161, Richmond County Commissioner of Elections.
Received, ordered, printed, and filed.
Petitions and communications.
None.
Land use call-ups.
M162, 43rd Avenue D mapping.
Coupled on call-up vote, I now ask that the clerk take a roll call vote on today's land use call-up items.
Abreu.
Aye.
Ariola.
Aye.
Aviles.
Aye.
Ayala.
Aye.
Barron.
Aye.
Botcher.
Aye.
Abreu.
Permission to vote on all items coupled on today's general order calendar? Aye.
I'll let you go.
Aye. Thank you.
Brennan.
Aye.
Brewer.
Aye.
Brooks Powers.
Aye.
Caban.
Aye.
Carr.
Aye.
De La Rosa. Dinowitz.
Aye.
Farias.
I vote aye on all.
Feliz. Gennaro.
Aye.
Gutierrez.
Aye.
Hanif.
Aye.
Hanks.
Aye on all.
Holden.
Aye.
Hudson.
Aye.
Joseph.
Aye.
Kagan.
Aye.
Krishnan.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lewis.
Aye.
Marte.
Aye.
Mealy.
Aye.
Menon.
Aye.
Moya.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Narcisse.
Aye.
Nurse.
Aye.
Osei.
Aye.
Palladino.
Aye.
Wrestler.
Aye.
Richardson Jordan. Riley. Rivera. Salamanca. Sanchez.
Aye.
Thank you. Schulman.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Ung.
Aye.
Velasquez.
Aye.
Vernikov.
Aye.
Williams.
I vote aye.
Juan.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Borelli.
Aye.
Powers.
I vote aye.
Speaker Adams.
Aye.
Today's land use call-ups are adopted by a vote of 45 in the affirmative and 0 negative. We'll now have communication from Speaker Adrian Adams.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you and your families stay safe as we experience hazardous air quality due to the wildfires in Canada. I want to begin by urging all New Yorkers to take this air quality health advisory very seriously and follow the guidance of our public health officials. That means New Yorkers should continue to limit outdoor activity and stay inside whenever possible with windows closed and reducing indoor air pollution. If you must be outside, wear a high-quality mask, such as an N95 or KN95. New Yorkers should also seek to avoid contributing to outdoor air pollution by using mass transit instead of vehicles, limiting energy use, and taking other conservation efforts. As a city, we must ensure that agencies are offering consistent guidance about these health hazards so that New Yorkers are equipped with the information they need to stay safe. Earlier this week, I traveled down to Washington, D.C. with some of our colleagues in the council to meet with the New York congressional delegation and members of the Biden-Harris administration. We discussed our requests for federal funding, support, and partnership to help meet the needs of people seeking asylum in our country and all New Yorkers. We're very grateful that the day after our productive and fruitful trip to Washington, FEMA announced that it will allocate more than $104 million to New York City to help cover the cost of providing services for asylum seekers. I want to express my gratitude to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and all of our federal partners for helping secure that critical funding, which represented the largest share received of any city in the country. We know our city requires even more funding and support, and we will continue working in partnership with the congressional delegation and the Biden administration to secure more for our city. The continued deaths and violence at Rikers have been deeply disturbing, and we mourn the recent death of Joshua Valles. The tragic circumstances surrounding Joshua's death and other disturbing incidents of violence at Rikers are problematic and further exacerbated by the Department of Corrections' repeated failures to accurately report the incidents to the Federal Monitor. Even more outrageous and unacceptable has been the department's response that it will no longer provide public information about when someone dies in its custody. By choosing to withhold information from the public, the DOC continues its dangerous pattern of disregard for oversight. The DOC cannot continue to operate without being accountable, and it is our role, along with other stakeholders, to ensure that this is not the case. I want to take a moment to plug our next New York City government hiring hall to recruit New Yorkers into city agencies. It will take place on Saturday, June 10th in my borough, Queensborough Hall. I urge all New Yorkers looking for opportunities to join the city's workforce, stop by and join us. As we begin the month of June, I want to acknowledge some important holidays. June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, during which we raise public awareness and support for more than 6 million Americans impacted by brain disorders. June 12th is Loving Day, which marks the anniversary of the Supreme Court decision Loving versus Virginia, which ended anti-miscegenation laws and allows interracial marriage in the United States. And June 14th is Flag Day, when we celebrate the adoption of our national flag back in 1777. Over the past 2 weeks, the Council hosted an Africa Day celebration and our annual Pride celebration here in the People's House. As we continue to celebrate Pride Month, it is critical that we uplift LGBTQIA+ New Yorkers through policies and investments, and I'm proud that some of the legislations we're passing today will do just that. Thank you to all of the Council members and caucuses that co-sponsored those events. Next week, the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus will be celebrating African American Music Appreciation Month and the 50th anniversary of hip hop. I hope all New Yorkers will join us on June 14th to honor the many legendary artists and giants of our lifetime. Finally, I want to wish a happy belated birthday to Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan, and happy early birthday to Council members Pirina Sanchez and Joanne Ariola. Now, colleagues, let's move on to our stated agenda. First, we will vote on the following finance items. Introduction 95AA, sponsored by Council members Justin Brannan and Farrah Lewis, would merge the Church Avenue and Flatbush Avenue business improvement districts. A preconsidered resolution authorizing a discount percentage rate for early payment of property taxes. A preconsidered resolution amending a previously granted tax exemption for one building in Councilmember Nurse's district. A preconsidered resolution amending a previously granted tax exemption for one building in Councilmember Richardson Jordan's district. A package of 12 preconsidered resolutions to authorize Article 11 exemptions for 27 buildings in Deputy Speaker Ayala's and Council members Richardson Jordan, Abreu, Feliz, Stevens, and Salamanca's districts. A preconsidered resolution to authorize an Article 11 exemption for one new building in Councilmember Salamanca's district. A preconsidered resolution to authorize an Article 11 exemption for one building in Councilmember Velasquez's district. A preconsidered resolution to authorize an Article 11 exemption for 10 buildings in Councilmember Feliz's district. A preconsidered resolution to authorize an Article 11 exemption for six buildings in Councilmember Abreu's district. Lastly, we will vote on the following pieces of legislation. First, we will be voting on 7 preconsidered state legislative resolutions. Next, Resolution 512, sponsored by Councilmember Julie Menin, calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign legislation to create an independent commission to oversee hospital pricing for the purpose of increasing access to hospital services, promoting financial stability for hospitals, and lowering healthcare costs for New Yorkers. Introduction 844, also sponsored by Councilmember Menin, would establish an Office of Healthcare Accountability. This office would audit city expenditures on an employee-related health care costs and make recommendations on how to lower these costs. It would also require the city to create an online site to provide information on the costs of hospital procedures and summarize the cost transparency of each hospital. We thank our staff members, Sarah Liss and Manoro Boot. Next, Introduction 325A, sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan, would require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, the DOHMH, to maintain a list of hospitals with emergency rooms and pediatric trauma centers in New York City. DOHMH would be required to provide the list to pediatricians practicing in the city and would also be required to mail the list to each address designated for a child's birth certificate. Finally, DOHMH would be required to provide this list to the Department of Education and child care programs for annual distribution to parents and guardians of children enrolled in child care programs, 3K and pre-K, and grades K through 8. Introduction 96A, also sponsored by Councilmember Brannan, would require DOHMH to establish a program providing vision testing and eyeglasses to New Yorkers whose income falls within 250% of the federal poverty level. This bill would make vision testing and eyeglasses more accessible to low-income New Yorkers because these services would otherwise be expensive or inaccessible to individuals without vision insurance. Thank you to our staff members, Sarah Liss, Christopher Pepe, Sarah Suker, and Manu Brooks. Next, we will vote on the following bills related to heart and cardiovascular health. Introduction 814A, sponsored by Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan, would require DOHMH to issue semi-annual reports on the quantities and locations of automated external defibrillators placed in public places. Placing AEDs in public locations has been found to increase out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival, improve patient health outcomes, and increase rates of return of a sustained heart rhythm. Introduction 975A, sponsored by our Health Committee Chair, Councilmember Lynn Schulman, would require DOHMH to make available on its website information on free adult, child, and infant CPR courses available to the public in New York City, and to update such information at least once annually. Introduction 996A, sponsored by Councilmember Mercedes Narcisse, would require DOHMH to post on its website the public places in New York City where blood pressure machines are located and provide recommendations on locations for such machines in high-need areas. DOHMH would also be required to support making at-home blood pressure machines available at no cost to the public at federally qualified health centers in 5 high-need areas in the city, and post the locations of such centers on its website. Thank you to our staff members, Christopher Pepe, Sarah Suker, and Manu But. Introduction 831A, sponsored by Criminal Justice Committee Chair Councilmember Carlina Rivera, would require the Department of Correction to create a resource navigator program to help connect TCGN BI, a lot of letters here, individuals and women in custody with alternatives to incarceration, transitional and permanent housing, and reentry programs. DOC would also have to submit recommendations to the mayor and city council on how to improve diversion and reentry resources for this population. We thank our staff members, Jeremy Whiteman and Natalie Meltzer. Introduction 976A, sponsored by Councilmember Althea Stevens, would require the Department of Homeless Services, or DHS, and the Department of Youth and Community Development, DYCD, to report on data on the LGBTQ plus homeless population. In New York City, despite the growing population of single homeless adults, there is a lack of data on LGBTQ plus New Yorkers who are unhoused. To ensure this population is properly served, this bill would direct the city to collect data to help guide policy and ensure equity of treatment. Thank you to our staff member, Christina Yelamati. Introduction 977A, also sponsored by Councilmember Stevens, would require drop-in centers to participate in the streamlined intake process for runaway and homeless youth to transition into adult shelters. Previously, runaway and homeless youth who aged out or timed out of DYCD shelters would stay in assessment intake shelters run by the Department of Homeless Services for up to 3 weeks until a bed in a DHS facility became available. Many RHY have expressed feeling unsafe in these shelters and have avoided the process. This bill amends the law to include DYCD-funded drop-in centers as a third type of originating facility, expanding the ability for runaway homeless youth to participate in the streamlined intake process and further increase access to services. We thank our staff member once again, Christina Yelamate. Finally, We will be voting on a package of zero waste legislation that will advance our city's efforts to divert organic waste from landfills, fight climate change, and create a greener, more sustainable future for all New Yorkers. Introduction 280A, sponsored by Majority Leader Keith Powers, would require the Department of Sanitation to establish community recycling centers in every borough to collect materials that are not regularly collected curbside, but which could be recycled or reused. These facilities would be required to be open for a certain number of hours per week, be in close proximity to public transit, and be easily accessible for people with disabilities. Information about each community recycling center, including its address, contact information, and hours of operation, would be posted online. This bill also requires DSNY to submit regular reports to the council on each center. This law would take effect immediately. Introduction 281B, also sponsored by Majority Leader Powers, would require DSNY to establish a minimum number of organic waste drop-off sites citywide and in each borough. These sites would be required to be open for a certain number of hours per week, be near public transit, and be easily accessible for people with disabilities. Information about each drop-off site, including its address, contact information, and hours of operation, would be posted online. Finally, the bill would require outreach and regular reports to the council. This law would take effect immediately. Introduction 274A, sponsored by Sanitation Committee Chair Councilmember Sandy Nurse, would codify in law a goal of zero divertible waste for New York City by 2030. The Department of Sanitation would be required to report if this goal cannot be met. Introduction 275A, also sponsored by Councilmember Nurse, would require the Department of Sanitation to report on their efforts to increase diversion rates as they work towards the goal of zero waste. The report must include information on specific materials and their recyclability, as well as efforts to recycle or reuse materials collected through public litter baskets and other sources. This law would take effect immediately. Introduction 244A, sponsored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif and me, would establish a permanent citywide residential curbside collection program to divert organic waste. Approximately 1/3 of all residential waste is organic material that can be composted. Currently, most of it is not separately collected, so it ends up in landfills. This program would require residents to separate both yard waste and organic waste, such as food scraps. The Department of Sanitation would then collect this organic waste weekly alongside other regular curbside collections. This legislation requires the program to be phased in over a brief period and for DSNY to conduct public outreach to residents, building owners, and maintenance staff. This bill goes into effect immediately. We thank our staff members, Christopher Sartori, Ricky Chawla, Brad Reed, Audrey Sun, and Morgan Barrett. I thank you for your attention, and now I turn it back over to our Majority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. We're now going to move into the discussion of general orders. We'll first hear from Councilmember Menon, followed by Councilmember Nurse.
Thank you so much. So I'm thrilled today that the City Council is going to pass my bill, the Healthcare Accountability and Consumer Protection Act, which will make New York City the first city in the country to create a healthcare accountability office. This new office is going to list the prices of medical procedures by hospital, and it will increase transparency for patients and make recommendations on how we can lower our healthcare costs. Currently, for example, a C-section in New York City can cost $55,000 at Montefiore or $17,000 at another New York City hospital. And the new office would harness the city's purchasing power to drive down skyrocketing healthcare costs. In 2017, our city spent over $6 billion on public sector employee, retiree, and dependent health care. Today, that number is close to 10% of our city's budget, or $11 billion. It's simply unsustainable. A recent study by 32BJ noted that we could potentially save up to $2 billion by creating this office. And other states that have enacted price transparency, such as New Hampshire and California, have seen enormous savings and reductions in their health care costs. That's money that we could allocate to affordable housing or education or other critical needs. I first of all want to thank the Speaker for her support. I want to thank Health Chair Lynn Shulman, Hospitals Chair Mercedes Narcisse, the incredible Labor Coalition that has supported this bill from the start, as well as bill drafters Sarah Suker, Nicholas Wadowski, Nell Beekman, Julia Goldsmith-Pinkham, Minora Boot, Christopher Pepe, and Sarah Liss, and from my team, Anna Correa, Brendan Jordan, and Jonathan Shutt for their support. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Nurse, followed by Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you. Hey, colleagues. Hey, pals. Today, I'm excited. I'm excited. Today, as thick smoke from forest wildfires in Canada covers our city and threatens our public health, we are preparing to pass a monumental achievement in our beloved city, the passage of the Zero Waste Act. With the passage of this act, we are declaring and reaffirming our right to a sustainable future. I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to all the community organizers, activists, and everyday heroes who made this victory possible. I want to recognize National Resources Defense Fund, New York Lawyers for Public Interest, Triage, WEAC, Big Reuse, LES Ecology Center, El Puente, BK Rott, and all the solid waste advisory boards across the boroughs. I want to thank you, colleagues. This package of bills has 42 co-sponsors on all 5 bills, making it the most co-sponsored package this body has passed. Shout out to Councilmember Sandra Ung for signing on yesterday. This is a clear commitment from us and New Yorkers for climate and environmental justice, and I am truly, truly so proud to be part of this historic body with you all. A good waste system is not simply a matter of convenience, but a matter of environmental justice and equity, and this legislation will reach far beyond the boundaries of our city. These bills are an act of real solidarity with communities that are fighting for clean air and water, like in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and upstate New York, where we send millions and millions of pounds of waste every day. It is the working class communities of color and indigenous peoples who have borne the brunt of toxic landfills, incinerators, and environmental racism. And this act is a rightful step towards healing the wounds inflicted by decades of environmental degradation. It is imperative that New York City, with action at the state level, move from the linear, exploitative model of extraction, production, and disposal, and embrace a circular economy that values regeneration, sustainability, and justice. I want to express my gratitude to Anel Hernandez for leading the research and negotiations from our staff side, the staff of Councilmember Powers and Hanif, Jeff Baker, Brad, Ricky, Andrew, our new committee counsel, Morgan, and of course, thank you, Speaker Adams, for throwing your full weight behind this package. Thank you so much for all of your work, and I ask for your support on these bills today.
Thank you. Congratulations. We'll now hear from Councilmember Stevens, followed by Councilmember Rivera.
Today we are voting on 2 bills sponsored by me to expand the reporting service for runaway and homeless youth. Intro 976 will require the Department of Homeless Services and the Department of Youth and Community Development to report quarterly on the number of LGBTQ homeless persons who receive DH services or DYCD services, as well as the number of shelter beds reserved for such persons. This data is well empowered the council to pinpoint the number of LGBTQ identified persons served by the homeless system so we can take steps to identify their needs and expand services to this too often marginalized group. Intro 977 will require drop-in centers to participate in a streamlined intake process for youth aging out of and timing out of shelters operated and funded by Department of Youth and Community Development and would intend to transfer to adult shelters. Advocates report that it takes up to 21 days to identify a shelter bed in an adult system. This bill would enable drop-in centers to conduct the intake process so that young people can remain in our HY system until they identify an available bed within DHS. I'm proud we are advancing these bills and calling attention to the needs of cities' most vulnerable youth. The RHY system is under-sourced and overlooked. Currently, there are only 60 beds for homeless young people at the ages of 21 to 24 in New York City. At the Youth Service Committee hearing in April, we heard passionate testimony from youth and advocates about how the demand for beds exceed the limited supply. We find the growing demand of shelters in the only compound the influx of migrant youth and the city's absurd directive banning young people from sleeping in drop-in centers. The RHY system is facing multiple crises, and our young people need our help. We celebrate the advancement of this legislation today and look forward to expanding more bold legislation actions in the committee that we can help runaway and homeless youth. I'd like to thank the staff for their hard work, and I hope all of my colleagues can vote yes today. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, my microphone was not working. We'll now hear from Councilman Rivera, followed by Councilmember Narcisse.
Thank you so much. The legislation we are voting on today, my bill, will serve populations that are uniquely vulnerable in our city's jails. Women and gender-expansive individuals, including transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and intersex people. These populations are especially likely to suffer from prior abuse and trauma, which can precipitate other mental health problems. 70% are caregivers, and incarceration has profoundly negative consequences for their children and families. At jail intake, as many as 25% of women and gender-expansive people reported they were homeless before being jailed or had nowhere to go upon release. Coordinated reentry planning greatly impacts detained individuals' reintegration into society and can reduce recidivism rates. My bill, Intro 831A, creates a centralized resource navigator program to assist women and gender-expansive individuals in DOC custody in locating available and appropriate reentry services. I want to acknowledge the TGNC NBI Task Force, which has worked tirelessly to review DOC policies and make recommendations to improve the treatment and housing of transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and intersex people in custody. Thank you for your service to ensure everyone is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. To close Rikers Island on schedule in 2027, we must be diligent in reducing the jail population and ending the cycle of recidivism. With innovative policies like the establishment of a resource navigator program, this goal is entirely within our grasp. Thank you to committee staff and, of course, my team in helping to draft this bill and getting it to this final stage. I'm proud to carry this legislation, and I urge my colleagues to vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Councilmember Narcisse, and batting cleanup, Councilmember Krishnan.
Thank you, Majority Chair and the Speaker, Adrian Adams, and all the team that make it possible for me under the leadership of Jeff Baker, Jeremy Jones, all of the team. Thank you. As a nurse, it brings me great happiness to speak today and vote to pass two bills which will increase access to health care and help close healthcare equity gap. Health is wealth. If healthcare is not affordable to all New Yorkers, our system is failing. Something is critically wrong when patients have to fight for their lives and hospitals are fighting for their license. Healthcare is too damn high, and hospitals' bills are too damn high in New York City. So that is why I'm proud to work with my colleagues, including sponsor Councilwoman Julie Menin and Healthcare Committee Chair Lynn, to pass this bill. This is saving money and saving our city healthcare infrastructure. Intro 996A, we must provide New Yorkers with every affordable resources to combat hypertension, which affects about 1 in 4 New Yorkers, with higher numbers for Black and Latino communities. If many people with hypertension don't experience any symptom, that's why we call it a silent killer. As a former ER triage nurse, I know firsthand that we must diagnose before we treating. By placing automatic self-administered blood pressure testing machine in public places will help educate New Yorkers about their blood pressure and make it more comfortable to talk about, thus provide a potentially life-saving resource to many. I am pleased that as a city council member, I'm taking that step to pass Intro 996 to increase access to sphygmomanometers, which will help save lives and have immediate impact on the health care of many New Yorkers. So thank you, everyone that worked with me to make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Councilmember Krishnan and Councilmember Hanif to follow.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader. In January of this year, America watched in horror as Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin collapsed onto the field moments after making a routine tackle during a game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Hamlin, 24 years old and in peak physical health, had suffered from sudden cardiac arrest. Thankfully, he has fully recovered, and I just saw him earlier this week practicing with the Bills. As Damar's story makes clear, however, AEDs save lives. Unfortunately, they aren't as readily accessible for everyone as they were for him. That's why I'm proud that as we mark the end of National CPR and AED Awareness Week, I'm proud to have led the passage of the HEART Act that we're voting on today, Intro 814A, which will help more New Yorkers find AEDs to save the lives of their friends, family, and neighbors. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in New York City, claiming hundreds of our loved ones every year. But by making AEDs easily accessible for all New Yorkers, with all information available as to their locations and whether they're up to date in terms of their maintenance, by doing that across the city, we can and will prevent countless deaths from cardiac arrest. I'd like to recognize and give a special thank you to my friend and constituent, Sumana Harihareshwara, who's here in the gallery. Who I'd ask to stand, please. Thank you, Sumana, for your work, your advocacy. Sumana's father had passed away because of a heart attack in 2010, but she has been a champion for AED accessibility and the inspiration behind the introduction and passage of this bill. I'd also like to thank Speaker Adams and Health Chair Lynn Shulman for prioritizing this issue, critical issue of public health in our City Council, to Chris Pepe and the Health Committee staff for all their work in shepherding this legislation forward, to my staff, Greg Clark, Chanel Martinez, and Chuck Park, and to the American Heart Association for their joint advocacy on this issue. And finally, a special thank you to Majority Leader Chuck Schumer for our partnership together on the federal and city level to make sure that legislation for increasing AED access passes here in New York City and in Washington, D.C. I'd urge all my colleagues to vote yes on this important bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Councilmember Hanif.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Hi, all. I am on the Zoom. I share an excitement with my colleague, Councilmember Nurse. Thank you so much to Speaker Adams and Chair Nurse for getting Intro 244A on today's agenda and for your partnership on this bill over the past year. I want to express gratitude to the 42 sponsors of this bill, especially the 12 co-prime sponsors. I also want to thank DSNY and CLA for the collaboration in getting this bill across the finish line. And I need to shout out the Progressive Caucus, who have been avid champions of the Zero Waste Act. Right now, more than a third of all trash that New Yorkers produce is organic waste. Currently, the vast majority of this waste is either incinerated, predominantly in communities of color, which creates terrible health impacts, or it rots in landfills, emitting methane, a greenhouse gas 25 times more destructive than carbon dioxide. As we have seen over the past few days, the climate crisis is here and we must take action now. This bill will create a citywide curbside composting program for residential buildings, diverting organic waste away from incineration and landfill towards productive uses like nourishing our city's soil or heating our homes. Collections will be mandatory weekly and year-round, allowing us to reach the needed environmental impact to meet the climate crisis and achieve economic efficiencies that will help the city financially. In order to ensure that New Yorkers have the information they need to participate properly, the bill requires DSNY to implement a language accessible and culturally competent outreach and education campaign. I want to close by thanking the countless advocates who've been instrumental in advancing this bill, including Triage, We Act, NRDC, 350BK, Sunrise, NYCLV, and countless more. I want to thank Alex Liao, Michael Whitesides, Nora Brickner, Moose Lamia, and Hannah Henderson-Charnow from my team, Anel Hernandez from Chair Nurse's team, Haley Goldstein, Ben Jacobs from Councilmember Powers' team, Brad Reed, Audrey Sun, Ricky Chawla, Malik Nasruddin, and Chris Sartori from the Council's Legislative Division, and Emily Mayer from the Progressive Caucus. We could not have done this without you all. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no one else signed up for general orders, we will now move into the report of special committees.
None.
Reports of standing committees.
Report of the Committee on Criminal Justice, Intro 831A, Citywide Resource Navigator.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Finance, Intro 958A, Flatbush and Church Avenue bids.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Pre-considered Reso 661, discount percentage.
Coupled on general orders.
Preconsidered LU 212 and Reso 672 through preconsidered LU 229 and Reso 689 on page 5, tax exemptions.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Health, Intro 96A, vision testing for low-income individuals.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 325A, emergency rooms and pediatric trauma centers.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 814A, automated external defibrillators.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 975A, cardiopulmonary resuscitation courses.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 996A, access to blood pressure machines.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Hospitals, Intro 844A, Office of Healthcare Accountability.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management, Intro 244A, Organics Collection.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intros 274A and 275A, Zero Divertible Waste.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 280A, Community Recycling Centers.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 281B, Organic Waste Drop-Off Sites.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on State and Federal Legislation, preconsidered M158 through preconsidered SLR 18, various home rule messages.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Youth Services, Intro 976A, LGBTQ homeless population reporting.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 977, intake process for runaway and homeless youth.
Coupled on general orders, I now ask that the clerk take a roll call vote on all of the items coupled on today's general orders calendar.
Ariola.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
As chair of the New York City Fire and Emergency Management Committee, I'm especially honored to be part of the passing of home rules, which will make S5678 and A7414 and S7289A and A7679 law in this city. The passing of these home rules ensures that our members of the FDNY and their families will be taken care of in the event of a tragedy, their loved ones taken care of after they are gone, as well as their illnesses received from on-the-job hazards be properly recognized. With that, I vote aye on all, with the exception of Intro 244A and M159. Thank you.
Thank you. Aviles.
Aye on all.
Ayala.
Aye.
Barron.
Explain my vote.
Go ahead.
I know this is going to bring tears to your eyes, but I will have no further comments in this meeting. Out of respect for those of you who put your health risk on the line and showed up in person, I would just like to encourage you to stay in when you do go home, and go home as soon as possible. This is a very serious situation. Do put on a mask if you must be out, but out of respect for you showing, I will not prolong this meeting any longer. And I'm sure there's some tissues available for you at the council to wipe your tears, because you're not going to hear from Barron today. But in all due seriousness, get home safely, and aye on all.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. We wish you well. Botcher.
Aye on all.
Brannan. Councilmember Brannan votes aye. Thank you. Brewer.
I vote aye, and I'm here. I'm the same age as Barron. Thank you.
Brooks Powers.
Aye on all. Congratulations to everyone passing the bill.
Caban.
Aye on all.
Carr.
I vote no on introduction to 44A and M159, and aye on the rest.
Thank you. De La Rosa.
Permission to vote on all land use call-ups and all items on the general order calendar.
Go ahead.
Aye on all, and congrats to all the colleagues. Thanks.
Dinowitz.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Farias.
I vote aye on all.
Feliz.
Permission to explain my vote.
Go ahead.
Want to congratulate colleague Julie Menon on the Healthcare Accountability Act. Healthcare costs are through the roof, and we need to take action to resolve unreasonable costs. The Healthcare Accountability Act is an important step that will help us save approximately $2 billion per year in healthcare costs. $2 billion. Now, I think all of us can agree that there are 2 billion things that we can do with those $2 billion, including modernizing our schools, modernizing our parks, modernizing our NYCHA, fixing our roads, paying workers the wages that they deserve. So I want to congratulate colleague Julie Menin. Great bill, and I look forward to seeing the positive outcomes from that bill. And I also want to congratulate my neighboring colleague, my neighboring council member, Althea Stevens, as well as council members Carlina Rivera, Sandy Nurse. Good bills that are going to help resolve challenges that vulnerable populations face. Thank you. Aye on all.
Thank you. Gennaro.
I vote aye, and Sandy Nurse is a hero. There you go. I vote aye.
Gutierrez.
I vote aye on all. Congratulations, Julie and Sandy.
Hanif.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Hanks.
Aye on all.
Holden.
Aye on all, with the exception of M159, of which I vote no.
Thank you, Councilman. Hudson.
Aye on all.
Joseph.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Kagan.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
I'm planning to vote against M159, that basically is extending the city's power to impose certain tax rates and multiple taxes on individual New Yorkers and various businesses like beauty services and gyms, etc. At a time of growing inflation, it is our obligation to help New Yorkers to lower their taxes, to lower tolls, to lower fares, to lower fees, instead of keeping them high or to increase them. So I'm voting nay on M159 and Intro 244A, and I'm voting aye on everything else.
Thank you. Krishnan.
Aye on all.
Lee.
Aye on all.
Lewis.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Speaker Adams and Majority Leader. I vote aye on all. As we prepare to commemorate the Juneteenth holiday next week, I would like to quickly make a plug for our package of Juneteenth bills, 1073, 1082, 1085, 214, and 296. I want to thank my colleagues, Council Members Williams, Hudson, Barron, Stevens, and Nurse on their leadership and partnership on our Juneteenth package being introduced today. Generations of oppression require studies into the generations of harm. The harm is oppression-driven enslavement. I encourage all my colleagues to sign on to these bills. Thank you.
Thank you. Marte.
Aye on all.
Mealy.
Aye on all.
Menin.
Aye on all, and I want to congratulate my colleagues on their zero waste package.
Moya.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Narcisse.
Permission to explain my vote for 1 second?
1 second.
Okay, I want to say thank you to American Heart Association that really helped me a lot, and Sarah Zucker and Manu, and congratulations to my colleagues, Julie Menin, that worked hard on this bill, and thank you to all the waste bill and Stephen. There's a great bill here. So thank you to Madam Speaker for allowing us to move through the city and to make it a place where we can live, work, and enjoy. Thank you, and be careful. Listen to Charles Barron, and I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Nurse.
I vote aye, and just congratulations to Councilmember Menin on this important health care bill.
Osei.
I vote aye on all. Congratulations to all my colleagues.
Palladino.
I vote aye on all except for M159 and also on 244A.
Thank you. Wrestler.
Aye on all, and just want to especially commend my colleagues who worked on the zero waste package. It's really exciting, and the healthcare accountability legislation from Councilmember Menin is a big deal. So congrats to all.
Richardson Jordan.
I vote aye. I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Riley.
Aye on all.
Rivera.
Congratulations to my colleagues. I vote aye.
Salamanca. Sanchez.
Hello. Sorry. Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. He's changing my screen. Okay, sorry. Congratulations to all my colleagues. I vote aye on all with the exceptions of pre-considered land use 214 through 225, on which I abstain, as I do further due diligence on Article 11 applications that these owners have within my district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Schulman.
Permission to briefly explain my vote.
Go
I
ahead.
want to congratulate everyone today on their package of bills, particularly Julie Menon on her hospital accountability and transparency legislation, which I'm a co-prime sponsor on, and Sandy Nurse for her organic waste legislation. And I just want to say, because of all the bills that we're passing today, that New York City will be a healthier place. And with that, I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Stevens.
Aye on all, and happy Pride, everyone.
Ung.
Aye on all.
Velasquez.
Aye on all.
Vernikov.
Aye on all except no on intro 244A and M159. Thank you.
Thank you. Williams.
Permission to explain my vote.
Go ahead.
As we approach Juneteenth, I'm thrilled to be a part of a package of bills seeking truth, reconciliation, and yes, we hope reparations. Thank you to my colleagues who are leading this effort, Councilmember Nurse, Hudson, Lewis, Barron, and Stevens. I urge everyone to sign on to the bills in this package. Special shout out to all the staff that worked tirelessly to get this done: Jessica, Jesse, CJ, Brenda, Elliot, Wesley, and of course, Jeff Baker. And last but not least, congrats to Council Members Menon and Nurse. Thank you. I vote aye. Did I say that already? I vote aye.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember. Juan.
Aye on all. Thank you.
Yeager.
Aye on all with the exception of M159, introductions 958, 244, 280, and 281. Thank you.
Thank you. One more. Borelli.
A moment of indulgence, Mr. Majority Leader.
You are indulged.
Thank you. I want to point everyone's attention to an article that was just recently posted in the BBC. World's most expensive city. New York, now top of the list, and Singapore. I can't do anything about Singapore, but we can do something here about New York. And that's why I'll be voting against M159 today. And by the way, I'm sorry, this is my son, John. I think, hopefully we don't have an Andrew Giuliani moment. Andrew's my friend, I say that in kindness. But New York City is now the most expensive city. Just 16 hours ago, CNBC, another news outlet, said New York is now the most expensive city for expats, people who are citizens of foreign countries who are coming here to live. And yet we are passing what would be an extension of some of the highest taxes in the country, specifically the income tax. For those of you who may not be aware, New York City is one of the few municipalities in the country with an income tax, and we had that for many years because property taxes were very low comparable to our neighboring states and jurisdictions. Mayor Bloomberg and some of our predecessors here in this room, no one here was there then, decided to almost double the effective property tax rate on all of our constituents. That affects homes, that affects condos, that affects co-ops, and that affects renters. Some of the affordability crisis we have today in housing is the direct result of these tax implications. So I would hope in the future we do more deliberation on giving Albany this authority to pass taxes that continue some of the highest tax rates in the country in an unfortunate situation where we do live in a city with an affordability crisis. So thank you. I vote aye on all with the exception of M159 and Intro 244. Thanks.
Powers.
I vote aye, and I want to give a special congratulations to Councilmember Nurse and Hanif on the Zero Waste package, which I'm proud to be part of today. I want to thank them and the staff here and their staffs for very, very hard work to get that over the finish line. And thanks to the Speaker and everyone else for bringing that forward and getting us to the finish line on that as well. I vote aye on all.
Speaker Adams.
Congratulating colleagues Julie Menin and Councilmember Sandy Nurse and her entire committee, our staff for working very, very hard to eliminate waste in the city of New York. Congratulations to all of my colleagues passing amazing legislation today. I vote aye on all.
All items on today's general order calendar are adopted by a vote of 50 in the affirmative, 0 negative, and 0 abstentions, with the exception of Intro 244A, which was adopted by a vote of 43 in the affirmative, 7 negative, and 0 abstentions, and 159 adopted by a vote of 42 in the affirmative, 8 negative, and 0 abstentions. Land use items 214 through 225 and accompanying resolutions adopted by a vote of 49 in the affirmative, 0 negative, 1 abstentions. One abstention. Intro 280A adopted by a vote of 49 in the affirmative, 1 negative, 0 abstentions. Intro 281B adopted by a vote of 49 in the affirmative, 1 negative, 0 abstentions. And Intro 958A adopted by a vote of 49 in the affirmative, 1 negative, 0 abstentions. And I want to announce a revised land use call-up vote, which is 46 in the affirmative and 0 negative. We will now move to the introduction and reading of bills.
All bills have been referred to committees as indicated on today's agenda.
Thank you. We're now going to move into the discussion of resolutions. Do we have anyone signed up to? I see we have Joe's son signed up to discuss resolutions. Seeing none, we are going to now have a voice vote on today's resolution. If you wish to vote against or abstain from today's resolution, please notify the legislative document unit by email or by approaching the dais before the vote. I'll now read the resolution into the record. Resolution 512 calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign legislation to create an independent commission to oversee hospital services pricing for the purpose of increasing access to hospital services, promoting financial stability for hospitals, and lowering healthcare costs for New Yorkers. Will all those in favor please say aye? All opposed say nay.
Aye.
Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We'll now move into general discussion. We have 4 members signed up. We'll first hear from Councilmember Kagan, followed by Councilmember Caban.
Thank you. This week I attended public hearing of the Committee on Fire and Emergency Management, chaired by Councilwoman Joanna Ariola, about promotional opportunities for EMS workers. It is completely unacceptable that starting salary of EMS workers in June of 2023 in New York City is $39,000 a year. We are talking about EMS heroes who are saving lives every day and helped countless New Yorkers during the pandemic. We have a moral obligation not just to raise maximum age of EMS workers who would be eligible for promotional firefighter exam, but also to raise their starting salary. They deserve it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councilmember Caban, followed by Councilmember Krishnan, and lastly, Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you very much. Today, alongside Public Advocate Jumaane Williams and my LGBTQIA+ caucus co-chair, Councilmember Hudson, I'm introducing Intro 1068 of 2023 to provide for the rights, protection, and economic security of some of our most marginalized, most criminalized, and most disrespected neighbors, New Yorkers who engage in sex work. In places like Australia and New Zealand, governments have taken this politically thorny issue and established smart, compassionate, evidence-based, and human rights affirming legal frameworks around sex work. And it's time for us to take a first step in the same direction. It feels especially appropriate to introduce this legislation in Pride Month, as sex work constitutes one of the essential planks of the LGBTQIA+ caucus's first of its kind Marsha and Sylvia plan. And as the Marsha and Sylvia plan notes, whether a given person engages in sex work owing to economic desperation and a lack of other employment options, or because they make good money, create their own schedule, and find it empowering, the city has a responsibility to protect the health, safety, and economic well-being of all New Yorkers, regardless of what they do for a living. And let's be clear, sex work is work. Among other provisions, Intro 1068 would prohibit housing discrimination against a prospective tenant on the basis of current or past sex work. It would create a board within DCWP tasked with ensuring sex workers know their rights in relation to specific workplace issues they are particularly likely to face, like wage theft. It would establish a program for awarding grants to community organizations that work directly with sex workers to provide economic support for mobility, health, housing, and social well-being. These are common sense, cost-effective strategies for making a New York with greater economic prosperity, greater public safety and public health, more racial and gender equity, and more care and compassion. And I'm excited to speak more about this vital legislation in the coming weeks and months. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Krishnan, followed by Councilmember Brewer.
Taxi workers are some of the most essential workers in our city. In my district of Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, I am proud that we have the largest population of driver residents in all of New York City. They are my neighbors, fellow parents, and friends. I see their cars parked on the side of the street, eating at our restaurants, walking their kids to school with me, and praying at our local masjids. However, despite being essential workers, unfair deactivations of drivers from billion-dollar for-hire vehicle companies don't just cut into the income of drivers. They strand them with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. They also harm an entire community, my community, and so many others across the city. That's why I'm proud today to be introducing Intro 1078 to end the unfair and wrongful deactivation of for-hire vehicle drivers in the city, and Intro 1079 to make sure that e-hails by drivers are paid at the same rates as street hails as well. I am proud to be leading this next fight for our taxi workers with the New York Taxi Workers Alliance and co-sponsors Councilmembers Shahana Hanif and Councilmember Linda Lee. At my side, I know together we will win because always driver power, union power. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we'll hear from Councilmember Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Councilmember Krishnan and others regarding trees, and I hope that people will support Intro 1066, which would require the Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability to consider the role of trees and canopy and vegetation in its long-term sustainability planning. And I think it mirrors and works with the bill that the chair has suggested along with Councilmember Bottcher to create an urban forest master plan. Number two, I just want to bring to people's attention that tomorrow we're doing a hearing and oversight and investigations about the Erie Basin Storage Facility fire. But when we did the investigation, thanks to the amazing staff at O&I, we're also learning that there are a lot of warehouse issues in our city, and I think we should pay a lot of attention to them. And third, I want to thank everyone who signed the letter to the president trying to get support for migrants being able to work in our city and in our country. Almost everybody signed it, and I hope that when the speaker went to Washington and helped, I think that everyone should understand as much as we do that that is what is needed. Yesterday, some of us were at the Lincoln State Facility, which is on 110th Street. Many migrant men are housed there, supposedly temporarily, but I don't know what temporarily means anymore. And all they want to do is work, and we've got to figure out how they can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm now going to call on Speaker Adrian Adams to close out today's stated meeting.
Thank you, Majority Leader. The stated meeting of June 8, 2023 is hereby adjourned.